Hello and welcome. Today I'm talking about managing change for business owners. Now, all businesses must undergo change to survive and thrive. Hence, managing change becomes a priority for all business owners and entrepreneurs. So we're going to discuss why change leadership is a fundamental skill for all business owners. We're going to talk about the science behind why we fear change and uncertainty from a personal perspective. And I'll share some tactics and some approaches to gain clarity, feel more in control, and lead well during change. I'm Jay Stone, formerly a change management practitioner, a corporate and executive coach, but also wife to my wonderful husband, Jamie. And I have a background in operations, project management, and change management. And I've worked in academia, media, entertainment and technology, events and not-for-profit industries. So I run my own coaching and change management practice, and as well as coaching professionals, I also work with organizational leaders to deliver change programs that energize teams and inspires action. And I think it would be silly of me to talk about change and not reference the situation we all find ourselves in across the world. This is perhaps the single largest event in our lifetime that is global, catastrophic, and has impacted almost everyone on Earth. Now, there's no denying it. Now more than ever, we are navigating what they're calling a VUCA environment. Highly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I, for one, can admit the reason I got into the field of understanding change was to never feel again what I think many of us can relate to. At one point or another during this pandemic, we've all grappled with our physical safety, our economic security, and the sudden changes in the daily conditions in which we are having to operate. Now, when I first heard the theme for this conference, Evolve, it reminded me of a story. Last year, my husband and I traveled the world, and one of the most beautiful places and one of the first places we visited was South Africa and the Western Cape. A beautiful city with the most amazing mountainside on one side and then incredible coastline on the other. It's honestly unheard of across the world. Now, we were hiking around the outskirts of the Cape Town with some local hikers we met through an app called Meetup, and they told us about the fires that had raged this area in February 2020, I think it was 2006. And it went for 5 days and nights, and the fire blazed a 50-mile trail from the outskirts of Cape Town down towards Africa's southernmost point. And as they explained how much the fire had destroyed, one of the local hikers with us had a smile on his face as he looked around. Now, all I felt was sadness and despair that so much destruction had been caused. And he told us that they had found something like 70 new species of foliage in the months after that blaze. So that fire was a whole new opportunity for rare plant species to germinate and flourish. And one, I believe, lay dormant deep underground and was thought to be extinct. So yes, it was damaging. Yes, it was devastating. And it's easy to see why we can fall into despair. But you see, there is also hope and opportunity and growth. And that's exactly what we are here to talk about. Now, when it comes to managing change and developing the mindset to thrive, there is an abundance of self-help books on it, right? But I think that there is one defining thing that the majority agree on. We cannot control what is happening around us. The waves of change that this pandemic is driving, the way it's impacting us all in very different ways, and how it is forcing businesses to change in ways that can really make us feel very out of control. However, we do have control over is what we choose to focus on. We can choose to focus on the potential for growth and hope, or the destruction and the despair. Now, I look back at my earlier frustration with change and uncertainty, and I almost describe it like trying to frantically hold onto sand in my fists. And if you've ever done this, you know that the harder you try, the quicker that the sand escapes. And that feeling of being completely out of control. And now the way I try to think about change and uncertainty is, if I could just add some water to that sand instead and begin to mold it into something else entirely. Granted, it will be different to what I first thought, but it has far greater potential. And I think this story illustrates perfectly the importance of our mindset during change, whether that's our personal mindset or instilling the right mindsets in our people to always be prepared for the opportunity that change ignites. And this is the essence of what I'm here to talk to you about today. Now, change leadership is a fundamental skill for any business owner, entrepreneur, or leader. But I realize that the idea of managing change for entrepreneurs seems a bit out of place, right? We became founders and business owners because on some level, we all have an entrepreneurial spirit, a desire for change, innovation, and growth. But the thing for entrepreneurs, the important thing to remember is that during a time where change is being enforced upon us, like during a pandemic, we have to ensure that we don't fall into the traps of tunnel vision and of allowing the lack of control to drive fear-based mindsets that negatively impacts the chances of success. Because even outside of a global pandemic, we can distinctly see how fast everything around us is changing. And in order to keep a competitive edge, keep up, the key to survival is constant adaptability. So we must be able to and be willing to effectively and efficiently change business models, business processes, or technologies in response to not only threats, but also opportunities. But the risk is, by sticking to an initial business plan because it's been perfectly designed and refusing to pivot when the situation requires it, dooms entrepreneurs' ventures to failure. So we have to embrace strong change strategies that all begin with the right mindset strategy. So whilst my esteemed colleagues here will share strategies for your business, I will share with you the strategies for your mindset to go from surviving to thriving. And also the culture that you can begin to cultivate within the very fabric of your organizations as it grows to increase tolerance for uncertainty across your workforce. So it's not just about being able to cope when change hits, but you have an organization that are drivers of constant change across all levels, ensuring you can continuously adapt and innovate. Now, I could give you a ton of change management tools and processes to use in your business, but without the mindset and principles to underpin these practical tools, they are practically useless. So with only 30 minutes, I'm going to narrow this presentation down to sharing the people side of change. And at the end, I will share ways in which you can work with me on a personal, team-based, or an organizational context to build a change management strategy within your organization. So with change and uncertainty likely to continue in our daily lives, in our projects, in our organizations, and across the world, you might be here because, like me, you want to be one of the ones not just surviving, but thriving. And maybe you're wondering how you can remain calm and effective during change personally. Or perhaps you want to know how to feel in control and stay focused, whether that's in your projects, in your business, or around personal challenges you're facing. Or maybe you already have a high tolerance for uncertainty and change, but perhaps you're wondering how you can support your people through what is likely to be a prolonged period of uncertainty. So if any of these relate to you, or if you're just here for the wild ride, you are most welcome. Now, the truth is, regardless of how risky we are as entrepreneurs, change can be intimidating for as much to us as it is for corporate managers, because the uncertainty that it creates uncertainty is a real issue for humans. And the research and the psychology really backs this up. There was a rather crude study done on animals where some animals were given an advance warning before given a shock, whilst others were not warned. Those that were never warned lived in a constant state of anxiety. And this demonstrated and showed how people experience greater stress and anxiety when they are uncertain of an outcome. So even if the outcome is negative, they prefer the negative outcome and knowing it than not knowing an outcome at all. Now, I'm going to explain why this is in a moment and how we can hack into our innate systems to ensure that we're working at peak performance. And you will come to notice that my business approach is very personal and very pragmatic. So everything I do is grounded in real stories, human science, and practical strategies. So we're going to jump straight in. Now, I've been fascinated about understanding how people thrive in moments of change, uncertainty, and adversity for about 7 years, over 7 years. And in my time as a coach and change management practitioner, I've seen how change causes me and others so much discomfort that it drove me into exhaustion, stress, burnout that would completely derail me. And when I started delving into the research, what worried me was that change was cited as one of the main stressors in life. It was the primary cause of work-related stress, depression, and anxiety in the UK. Even if change itself was overall positive, as in there was a positive outcome at the end, a better vision, we can still struggle to move beyond the fear and take those steps. And what I wanted to know is why? Now, I wanted success, like most people. And I spoke to psychologists, neuroscientists, entrepreneurs, and CEOs, and I explored the world, seeing how people across different countries and cultures remain resilient and adaptable in some of the most challenging of environments. I talked to people who, no matter how challenging a situation, they could overcome it at all odds, whilst I saw others would fall into victimhood. They'd spiral into depression and wouldn't be able to move forward. And what I found during my years of research was that there were usually two types of people. Those that were really exhausted by change and this fast-moving world, and those that were really excited by it, but were still really exhausted by it too. So you see, these people were not immune to being exhausted, but they did have a different perspective. a different lens that they were looking at things, a different mindset that meant they very quickly saw the potential that change uncovered and the opportunities that opened up for them. And we're seeing this right now. Whilst most people are losing their heads completely, there are people and companies being made out there. They recognize that change is inevitable. They are adapting. They are innovating. They are evolving. And I love this early example. During the beginning of the pandemic, Italy is, of course, well known for its good food, particularly its good pasta. And nobody makes pasta quite like Italian nonnas. So Grandma Nonna usually hosts regular pasta workshops in the countryside in a very small village in Italy. But she was forced to shut down her workshops in March of this year. But her granddaughter came up with a brilliant plan to take her classes online. So Grandma Nonna changed things up and teaches her cooking skills to people all over the world now. And now they are thriving. Why? Because she adapted. And another example closer to home, a real estate agent who has transitioned their business motto to rethink, relocate, release. This is in response to the trend in London of going from getting bigger and bigger offices to moving towards complete remote working and releasing the leases on their real estate. So what I found in these people were that instead of asking questions like, but what am I going to do? Why is this happening to me? These people asked, what am I going to do? How can I make this work for me? So subtle. But the outcome of that question, the response to that question is entirely different when you ask it in a different way. So knowing that I wanted to be one of these people who could go beyond just surviving and thrive, I knew I had to develop a different set of skills and a mindset and adopt a different set of behaviors that allowed me to quickly adapt to situations of unknowns. And it's what I now call the art/science to thrive amidst uncertainty and manage change. And what I came to learn and appreciate is that change is inevitable. But it is not the change itself that is the issue anyway. It's the way in which we as humans experience and attach meaning to change. So we experience discomfort, then we resist it, and it impacts our ability to evolve quickly to threats or opportunities. And often this is as a result of a lurking fear that paralyzes us, it demotivates us, and we're so full of self-doubt that it exhausts us completely. Now, change is scary for many business owners because it brings on the surface the fear of losing control. But where does this fear come from? That's what I wanted to know. And how do we tackle that? Now, many of the answers led me to understanding the neurological reasons why humans resist change. And on the most basic level, your brain is actually working against you when it comes to change and uncertainty. What neuroscientists tell us is that our brains are wired to avoid it. It's evolutionary in nature and is part of our brain's inherent makeup from our hunter-gatherer days. So change meant danger, and the unknown meant being eaten by a lion. So the brain evolved to avoid it completely. So when we think about it in this way, it's simply an old survival response, which really doesn't match up to the modern day world we now live in. And whilst it's an incredible response that has ensured our survival as a species, it's also a real pain when it comes to change and doing something different, something that we haven't done before. Because our brains crave familiarity as if it requires it for its very survival, anything unknown, anything new, it will deem it too scary and it will log it as too dangerous. And it will begin to feed our minds with stories and insecurities and excuses to avoid anything that it deems unsafe. And it will trap you in your head by making you overthink, and in comes fear. Now, fears either stop us in our tracks from doing something that the brain perceives as dangerous, or it can transpire into resistance, either in ourselves or those that we lead. So not only is this innate survival response a big reason why we experience fear when things are changing and there's lots of uncertainty, but it's also the reason we experience those moments of self-doubt, hesitation, and we overanalyze things to death. So more than this, something else that I discovered during my research was that it also reduces our cognitive functions. Okay, it reduces our ability to think straight. So we essentially get dumber. And let me explain this very quickly. When there is a high level of uncertainty and ambiguity, our brain signals that we are at threat and prepares us for fight, flee, or freeze, in exactly the same way as if we were in physical danger, like being chased by a lion. So what happens is that when you feel at threat and your stress response is activated, the more emotional side of your brain, which I call the chimp, takes over the more rational side of your brain, the executive brain. It's officially called the amygdala hijack. You can check that out on Google, but I call it the chimp takeover. And that's because when this happens, when our stress response is high, out goes problem solving, out goes creativity, out goes our ability to make decisions, out goes our ability to think straight. Because your brain prioritizes blood to other parts of your body to fuel it to fight or run. And in comes panic, heightened emotions. We get easily confused. Our heart rate increases. We're so fearful, we become paralyzed by indecision. And we tend to take short, sharp breaths and we become very, very tense. So just think about the last time you were asked to speak in public. If you have a fear for public speaking, which I know a lot of people do, if you don't, good on you. But you will have experienced this fear response. Now, what is really worrying is that we also become very narrow-minded and completely miss opportunities because our brain isn't even looking for them. It's so consumed by the immediate threat, and it's desperately trying to get us back to a sense of familiarity, normality, and comfort, that it's not even looking for the potential opportunities that change can bring us. So what we need to do is limit the impact of these automatic responses by upping our level of tolerance for uncertainty, by giving our brain what it needs, a sense of safety through control, choice, and certainty. Now, these are not often in abundance when we're talking about change. But here's how we can hack into our mainframe and avoid this happening to us. Now, Dr. Sarah McKay, a neuroscientist, highlights that those with a high tolerance for uncertainty are people who have good emotional and cognitive control. So it's what I call mastering self, where we become skilled at emotional regulation and keeping our thoughts and responses in check. Now, I get it. When somebody said to me that a strategy for my success was about getting in touch with my emotions, I was like, nah, okay? I want strategies. I want hardcore strategies, not all this fluffy stuff. But as entrepreneurs, you will know that your emotions and your mindset are deeply entrenched in your business success. Emotions drive behavior. So if you're coming from a place of fear and desperation, that will drive your business decisions and actions, and the same for your staff. So one way we can master our emotions and keep responses in check is to have what I call a calm practice. And some great calm practices to manage our stress response and sustain a positive outlook includes building your self-awareness through reflection, such as journaling. And one thing to say here, every successful CEO and creative person I know has some form of journaling process. Meditation, yoga, prayer, exercise, they can all activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically the internal fan system. So for any IT people out there, it's basically the fan in the machine to stop it overheating and blowing up. Now, another way is we must see emotions and fearful thoughts for what they are. They are just internal built warning signs, right? Like the ones that appear on your computer that nudge us to consider what is going on that might be making us feel a threat. And by bringing these emotions into conscious thought, before we unconsciously react to them, we can begin to deal with them before they create the adverse effects we talked about, right? That reactive behavior rather than responding effectively. And in this way, we can decide at what level we need to be afraid. Okay, if it's not a lion outside your cave or a serious threat to your life, then we can lower the threat level, get your cognitive functions back up to optimal. Now, in organizations, the way I explain this, I like to use the emotions iceberg as an example of this because it illustrates perfectly the mistakes that most leaders can make when dealing with resistance of change. So if you look on the top, you have all the behaviors on the top of the surface. And for you, this might look like procrastination, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, inner critic. And underneath is all the really uncomfortable lurking fears. Fear of the unknown. What will happen? How will I cope? Fear of failure. Will I be able to do this? Will I be competent in this? Fear of loss. What about my business plan? What about all the work I've already done? So naming the beast and bringing awareness to how we feel and identifying some of those core fears and helping others do the same is one of the most fundamental ways we can manage change at its cause, to really uncover what's kind of driving the behavior that we're seeing on the top of the iceberg. But if you're only ever plastering over the symptoms at the top of that iceberg, they will simply find new ways to appear. But address the cause, the stuff underneath the surface, either of your own or your people's fears, and you begin to alleviate that discomfort. Now, this is something I found out quite recently. Did you know that emotions are contagious? So as business owners and leaders and even parents, when we don't carefully manage our own feelings and stress effectively, it becomes a problem. Because what we know is that human beings are hardwired to unconsciously pick up on the emotions of others in 8 to 40 thousandths of a second. So when you're in a really powerful position, you tend to be more infectious. So the second part of resilient people, or people with a higher tolerance for uncertainty, they are easily able to compartmentalize their thoughts and choose what to pay attention to and what to ignore. And this is what I call manage controllables. So our stress response, what I found out, is triggered more aggressively when we're focusing our time and energy on things that are outside of our direct control. And this fuels these negative emotions and thoughts that arise around being helpless, feeling backed into a corner or out of control. And so those people that could regulate their stress response more appropriately to the situation tended to keep their focus on the things they do have direct control over. In Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he shares a great tool to keep effective people focused. And he calls it the circle of control. So in the outer circle, which is the circle of concern, you list the things that you are concerned about in your business or in your personal life, and recognize that to some degree you do not have control over those things. Then create a separate list in your inner circle, in your circle of influence. Think about the things that you do have direct control over related to the things that you're concerned about. So you can't control what happens with the market. You can't control that the pandemic means you have had to shut shop. I can't control the negative impact of climate change. But you can control the way you respond, the way you adapt your business and operations. You can control where you place your focus and mindset. I can control ensuring that my friends have eco-friendly products or that I avoid plastic. So it's the things in your circle of influence that are in your direct control that you then base your objectives, your KPIs, your actions on those things. And you can do this with your teams as well as working, on your personal challenges. So that's just one tool to manage some of the controllables. So to recap, we've covered what we can do to prevent these innate or automatic responses from taking over and stopping that chimp takeover, and how we can create space to constructively respond to moments of crisis instead of just reacting out of fear and desperation, which in turn ensures our cognitive functions don't diminish when we need them the most, and we can make better decisions, we can think more clearly around challenges, and we free up the capacity to be able to help our teams to do the same. So this leads us on to our final part. Now, I realized once I'd handled myself, master self, and my projects, managed the controllables, that really it was useless unless I could help others to do the same, especially as a leader. And I'd only ever really led a team through periods of stable growth. But I needed a completely different approach to leading them through what was likely to be prolonged uncertainty. Now, it's even more important compared to corporate leaders, I think, for entrepreneurs to ensure that their teams understand the new situation of the company. So that not only can they manage their own state, but more so that they can be looking out for opportunities too, to establish stronger business relationships with the customers, grab hold of emerging trends, or keep eye on the competition. Now, these are tough times for every entrepreneur and leader. Whether you directly manage people or not, in some way, you're going to have to navigate the fear and the paranoia that will run wild as a result of insecurity, uncertainty, and what will likely mean a lot of change. So whether that's your employees or your customers or your families. Now, this isn't a job that most of us signed up for, and not everyone will rise to the occasion. But if you are, I wanted to quickly run through just 3. So there's only a few that I've been able to keep into this short period. There's just a few of the big C's to energize change that I work with leaders on. So I wanted to just share a few with you today. The first one is communication. It's fundamental. Communication is the simplest way to ensure your people feel a sense of control, certainty, and choice that they crave. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, people will suffer less if they know what might be coming. So by communicating, you're giving people the information they require from a trusted source instead of listening to the gossip and the hearsay. And one of the mistakes I often see over and over again with leaders is waiting until they have all of the information and facts. We cope better with information when it's staggered. It's far more important to cycle communication and repeat the same messages often than to wait till the final moment when you have all of the information and it was all perfect. So what I often get asked by leaders and managers is, what if I don't know something? Just tell them that. Just say, we don't have all the information yet, but this is what we do know, and this is when we're going to tell you the next update. Compassion. At the end of the day, change is a necessary part of business and life, and there may well be some undesirable outcomes for some people, but we can always ensure that people retain their dignity, and we can do this through compassion. Now, when layoffs or redundancies are unavoidable, addressing the emotional needs of people who are let go is not only important for them, but it's also important for the people left behind. And there's some really interesting research by Gerald Greenberg, a management professor of Idaho State University. And he provides some really, really compelling evidence that compassion affects the bottom line when he tested approaches to communicating pay cuts in 2 different factory plants. So the message was the same to both plants, but they found when they delivered the same message with compassion, the rate of theft decreased considerably. So the next one that I wanted to talk about was celebrate. Okay, the organizational theorist Carl Rieck shows in his classic article called Small Wins that when an obstacle is framed as too big, too complex, or too difficult, people become overwhelmed and they freeze in their tracks. Yet when the same message or the same challenge is broken down into less daunting tasks, people are able to proceed with confidence to overcome it. And for the same reason, marking those small wins along the way by celebrating creates this sense of progress that actually has shown to give us a dopamine hit in a similar way that chocolate does. So celebrating is a really, really important part, even those small steps, really, really important part in terms of maintaining motivation and engagement during change. Co-create. Remember, we need to create as much control, choice, and certainty as we can for ourselves and others. So allowing them to be part of the changes provides that. So what you can do as a leader is give your team the why and the what, and let them do the how. So we've covered quite a lot today. Master self, dealing with personal challenges, manage controllables in our businesses and in our projects, and mobilizing others, leading people during change. Now, if you would like to work with me in any of these capacities, here's a few ways that you can do just that. I provide one-on-one coaching, and that's all around framing the right mindset to lead through change, both personally and professionally. And we work on creating a clear vision for change so that you have clarity in your direction, get better connected with the leader you want to be so that you can lead with confidence, and unlocking those internal barriers and fears so that you can find your courage to drive change. I also run change workshops for teams, so facilitating workshops and training for management teams and employees and SMEs. And this is all about guiding managers to define their own personal attitudes to change and approaching it positively, equipping managers with tools to support their team and maintain engagement, and developing personal coping strategies for managing change as an employee. And finally, change management. I support SMEs to embed change capabilities throughout their organization. So this is about embedding a change management methodology to minimize the negative impact of change, outlining the competencies required in your team to support your ongoing change strategy, and integrating a can-do culture where change is regarded as a responsibility of all staff rather than just the senior team. And you can head over to my landing page where you can book a free 30-minute discovery call with me. And just finally, I want to thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to be here with you today. And now we have an opportunity for any questions.